This is I'm Stark, and in this video we will be looking at the Chinese Civil War and how China became communist. So the Chinese Civil War started in 1927 when Mao first led his communist insurgents to challenge the Republic government of Chiang Kai-shek. Now this officially ended 5 years of earlier collaboration, and it sparked an on-off civil war. Now the fighting ended in 1937 when the two were once again connected to fight the common enemy of Japan, and this lasted throughout World War II. However, when the Japanese surrendered in August 1952, Mao and Chiang Kai-shek announced a bilateral agreement which agreed to suspend hostilities between them. However, this was only used as a way to build up military forces for both sides, and within a year the civil war resumed with the communists in the favourable position. Now Mao was in the extra favourable position because his army contained 1.2 million troops and an extra 2 million non-professional troops, whereas the KMT, which was led by Chiang Kai-shek, lacked both resources and unity. So with the US worried about another world power turning red due to their ideas of containment and the domino theory, which happened a bit later, they spent billions of dollars on military aid, and tens of thousands of US troops were sent to train KMT troops. Now this was all despite the fact that some officials in Washington, like George Marshall, saw China as a lost cause. Now Mao was able to receive slight military support from the Soviets, yet after the Second World War he had also signed a treaty of friendship with Chiang Kai-shek. Now this may have been because Stalin underestimated Mao, or he was wary of him as a potential communist rival, as he would later become in the Cold War. So by the spring of 1949, there had been many decisive campaigns which caused many casualties, and had allowed Mao's communist forces to capture the KMT capital, Nanjing. Now their next focus was to be the wealthiest city in China, which was Shanghai. And at this point of the war, many of the residents in China were open to the idea of a communist government. And this is because the KMT government was corrupt, it was incompetent, and the unemployment rates of the country stood at 37%. However, there was many brutalities of Mao's People's Liberation Army that people didn't know, as they were concealed. For example, they had executed 2 million landlords, with the land being distributed to 300 million peasants. Now the strength of the communist troops were too strong, however, and within just days Shanghai was in communist control. So the victory in Shanghai paved the way for the communist takeover of China, which occurred in October 1949. So with the communist victory in China, Chiang Kai-shek and his fellow nationalists fled to Taiwan, and in Taiwan he established the Republic of China, and he remained here as the leader until his death in 1975. And throughout this time he declared that he was the legitimate leader of China, he was just in exile. Now in July 1949, Dean Acheson also wrote the White Paper, which meant that the US would stay committed to supporting the KMT in Taiwan, but it would be done secretly so China did not become aggravated with him. Now the White Paper also justified the withdrawal of military support for Chiang Kai-shek, as he said that China was beyond the control of the US. So the major problem for the US was in fact the Sino-Soviet Treaty, which was signed in 1950. Now there was much blame within Washington about the loss of China, about who was to blame, as they realized the implications of having to fight not one but two great communist superpowers. However, many also believed that Mao would become an Asian Tito and would not be pulled into the Soviet orbit. And this was because Tito was the leader of Yugoslavia, and although he was a communist country, he was not a Stalinist, and he wasn't in the Stalin's sphere of influence as such. However, this was unlikely when Mao made a speech on the 30th of June 1949 declaring that he would align himself with the Soviet Union, whilst he also condemned the imperialist Britain and America. And in December 1949, he accepted an invitation to the Soviet Union where they worked on a common strategy to promote revolution, and they also signed the Sino-Soviet Treaty, which was a mutual defense treaty and a way of binding the two countries together. So after the loss of China, Acheson reviewed the US policies in Asia in 1950, and this was called the Defensive Perimeter Strategy. And Acheson suggested increasing the defense budget and building a defensive perimeter around the Pacific areas to prevent communist advances. So US bases were therefore placed at Japan, the Ryukyu Islands, Guam, and the Philippines. Acheson was, however, criticized for omitting Korea. Now, this policy took the pessimistic view that the US would be unable to protect mainland Asia because of Mao in China. However, the policy was of significant economic importance because the Pacific area provided the US with many raw materials. So thank you for watching. Obviously, this was a major event which meant that completely changed the Cold War for the later stages, as there was another communist power, and in the end it was 3 countries fighting against each other rather than just capitalism against communism. But thank you for watching and see you soon. Bye.